All right, 4C is the base angles of an isosceles triangle are congruent. So that's called the isosceles triangle theorem. So if you have an isosceles triangle, sometimes it's just an isosceles triangle by itself, and sometimes it's within another figure. So let's say that these are the legs of the isosceles triangle. We know that these base angles are going to be congruent. So if this is x degrees, this is also x degrees in our triangle. So this is a very typical example of how you would use that. All right, so let's say this is an isosceles triangle, and this is, I don't know, I'm going to say 70 degrees. I don't know how big it is. Yep, sorry. So I want you to find the measure of this angle right here. So find x. This is a very typical example of the isosceles triangle theorem. And we'll be using a few more in conjunction with that. So I've got a 70-degree angle, and I'm trying to find this angle right here. All right, so what do we know about this angle right here? How big is it? 70 also, right? Because these are vertical, right? So if this one is 70, don't we know that this one is also 70? Because we know that vertical angles are always congruent, no matter what. That was one of those things that we wrote earlier, right? Okay. So now when I take a look at my diagram, I don't even need that top triangle anymore. So I can cover that up if I want to. I know all three of these angles in the triangle add up to how much? If I add all three angles up, what do they equal? 180, right? Okay. But before we do that, we need to use the fact, since this triangle is isosceles, we know that this angle is congruent to this angle. So this angle is also x degrees, right? So that's what has to happen first. You have to have your picture labeled that way so that you know what's happening within that triangle. So now I'm going to turn my paper back around. So now I can do the math of that using the triangle sum theorem. So this part right here was because the base angles in an isosceles triangle are congruent. And now I'm going to use the triangle sum theorem that tells me that 70 plus x is equal to 180 degrees, right? And now I can do my algebra and solve that equation. Okay, so take a minute and solve that equation. That's a typical problem that you would solve, showing that you understand that base angles of an isosceles triangle are congruent. So it may be using algebra, or it may just be, they may just use numbers in there, but you would apply that the same way, whether it's numbers or whether it's got algebra, a missing value in there. All right, so solving this, I'm going to simplify this left-hand side. 70 plus 2x is equal to 180 degrees. I'm going to subtract 70 on both sides. So 2x is going to equal to 110. And when I divide both sides by 2, I get x to be 55. You can always plug 55 back in here and double check and make sure that 55 plus 70 does indeed equal 180 degrees.